we're never more than 50 or 60 clicks from the ocean here in Nova Scotia. So if you like coastal type of environment, then it's pretty hard to beat. Newfoundland is the same. Of course, Newfoundland's a much larger province than Nova Scotia is, and New Brunswick as well, PEI. They all have their own aspects of beauty. But I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, at least on the East Coast with overlanding and kind of adventuring that I find is really just, overlanding in general, or, if you want to refer to, I guess, as the trendy term of overlanding, is the community aspect. And on the East Coast, I think that, the community is a big part of it. We're generally smaller provinces in the country. And you see that from town to town as you go through there, get the opportunity to talk to a lot of people, meet a lot of people, and people are very welcoming and have lots of questions. And it's just a really great way to interact. There's so many little beautiful towns in and through the province and throughout the region. So I think that's probably my favorite part of it is just, the people on the East Coast. The scenery is amazing. And I mean, there's lots of places that are beautiful, but the people on the East Coast are really what make it the East Coast to me.
Are you into four-wheeling, camping, and exploring? How about off-road racing like mud bogs, short course, wheel-to-wheel racing, or even desert races? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to 4x4 Canada podcast. My name is Wes, and I've been four-wheeling since I was 6 weeks old. I have over 20 years experience in 4x4 shops, many more than that in the off-road racing, and a lifetime of exploring the backcountry across Canada. Every week, we bring you a new guest where they give you their perspective on the industry. We discuss everything from four-wheeling, overlanding, every form of off-road racing across this great country, as well as we talk to many Canadian manufacturers and 4x4 shops. Just a quick reminder that if you're looking for more episodes, you can find all of our episodes on 4x4canadapodcast.com or your favorite podcast sharing platform. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at 4x4canadapodcast.com. Now let's get to the show. Hey, I'm Wes, and I'm the host of the 4x4 Canada podcast.
I'm Jared with Roam Wild Overland.
And I'm Andrew with Roam Wild Overland.
Jared and Andrew, thank you guys for coming on tonight. I've been really looking forward to this last couple of weeks that we've been talking, and you guys are our first East Coast guests on the podcast. So really want to thank you guys. I know it's late over there, and you're about 4 hours ahead of me. So I appreciate you guys taking your time to spend with me. So originally, we were going to have my co-host Trisha on tonight, and she decided that overtime was more important than talking about Jeeps and camping and exploring and that. So
overtime equals Jeep parts.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. She got paid for the Jeep parts somehow, right? So,
yeah.
So before we get in too deep, I do want to ask the listeners for a favor. If you enjoy the 4x4 Canada podcast and get value from it, please share it with your friends or someone you think will enjoy it also. So, Roam Wild Overland. I mentioned earlier you guys are from the East Coast, and you're from Nova Scotia, right? Right? Okay.
That's right.
So, Roam Wild Overland, there's a YouTube channel involved. There's a lot of exploring that, but you guys also have a overlanding store by the same name. So, you're basically a combination of a store, but you're also a YouTube channel and enthusiasts as well. So, we'll get into the Roam Wild Overland store soon, but I want to learn more about you guys. So first of all, let's talk about overlanding or exploring on the East Coast. I mentioned off the air that I haven't been any farther east than Newfoundland. I got to admit that it's a toss-up between BC and the East Coast and what's more beautiful. And I think, the two opposite ends of the country are the prettiest ones. Sorry, Saskatchewan. But let's talk about exploring the East Coast. What do you guys love about the East Coast?
I guess I'll start with that, Andrew. First of all, Wes, I mean, thanks for having us on here, and it's great to get the opportunity to talk to you. I think East Coast in general is just, you're right. It's a very beautiful part of the country. Like I said earlier, we're never more than 50 or 60 clicks from the ocean here in Nova Scotia. So if you like coastal type of environment, then it's pretty hard to beat. Newfoundland is the same. Of course, Newfoundland's a much larger province than Nova Scotia is, and New Brunswick as well, PEI. They all have their own aspects of beauty. But I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, at least on the East Coast with overlanding and kind of adventuring that I find is really just, overlanding in general, or, if you want to refer to, I guess, as the trendy term of overlanding, is the community aspect. And on the East Coast, I think that, the community is a big part of it. We're we're generally smaller provinces in the country. And you see that from, town to town as you go through there, get the opportunity to talk to a lot of people, meet a lot of people, and people, are very welcoming and have lots of questions. And it's just a really great way to interact. There's so many little beautiful towns in and through the province and throughout the region. So I think that's probably my favorite part of it is just, the people on the East Coast. The scenery is amazing. And I mean, there's lots of places that are beautiful, but the people on the East Coast are really what make it the East Coast to me.
Yeah, and I'll just expand on what Jared said. So I'm a big fan of setting up camp next to the water. We get to pick between lakes and oceans, and we've got the Northumberland Strait, and it just seems that there's a lot of diversity when it comes to your choices. Now, because we are a bit of a smaller province, a lot of the spots that are really desirable, they get filled up pretty quick, and overlanding for the good of overlanding, the hobby is growing quite a bit. So in this area of the country, but there's so many beautiful spots around. Like I prefer myself salt water. I like to hear the waves. I like to hear the seabirds and things like that. And so for me, I really like being able to have that choice. And when the flies are bad, you want to camp next to the ocean, right? When it gets a little chillier, that's when I start to move like inland and get away from the water.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've watched some of your YouTube videos, Roam Wild Overland on YouTube, and we'll leave a link for that in the show notes. But some of the videos you guys have done, it's stunningly beautiful. Like coming from as a West Coaster or somebody that's lived in Calgary, and I've lived in Ontario, and that it's hard to believe that this is still part of the same country, right? Like it's hard to believe that you're not, off in Europe somewhere or something like that. It's just stunningly beautiful over there. And is it something that did you guys both grow up there in Nova Scotia? And when second part of that question, I guess, would be that is exploring or camping and four-wheeling and is that something that you grew up doing?
So for me, I grew up in Nova Scotia. So I started out in my first exposure to the outdoors was through like Boy Scouts Canada, and I took that pathway up. And then that ended up turning into backpacking when I was younger, and my body was, could handle the long hikes and stuff. And then that evolved into, I also have a 84 Westie, a Volkswagen. Yep. So I kind of did the van life kind of off grid, not so much overlanding with it because you don't want to go too far back in the woods with a 40-year-old Volkswagen. But, and then when I made the transition from like van life, I already had half the gear. Like it was a really easy transition to go from, recreation time in a van over to overlanding, except for I had to get a Gladiator in order to really do it. So that was a bit of a jump from the Volkswagen to the Gladiator. But I spent a lot of time in the woods growing up. I was kind of concentrated on the eastern shore and the south shore of Nova Scotia. But there's still things like when Jared and I are trying to pick out a spot to go camping for the weekend with our families, there's still places that blow your mind, right? Even though I grew up here, there's still places that you didn't think exist. You just go around a turn and there's a vast ocean and a big beach that you never knew was there. So, and I'm sure that's the same in British Columbia and a lot of the coastal property in the country.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I'm a little bit different than Andrew. I mean, I'm a transplant here in Nova Scotia. I grew up in New Brunswick, and then I came here in my university years and did my university here. And ended up staying essentially. For me, my background started pretty young with the outdoors. My father was an avid outdoorsman, hunting and fishing. So I grew up doing that kind of stuff. Fly fishing on the Miramichi River. World famous and amazing experiences growing up. And so I gravitated very young to the outdoors. I always enjoyed being outdoors. It was kind of something I naturally inherited from my dad. And as I got a little bit older and kind of, started to kind of mature, I guess, a little bit with going off on my own. I was fortunate enough that we had an old four-wheeler, and I used to take that thing and go back in the woods and camp and just run the trails and camp. And that's kind of how it started for me. And I got away from it for a while, to be honest. I mean, you start into your career and you have a family and priorities shift a little bit. And I got away from it for a while. And then, I guess it kind of drew me back. I still did the hunting and the fishing, but just the time camping diminished a bit. And then just in the last, 8-9 years, I've gotten back into it and really, working hard to try to expose my kids to it and my family to it. And I really believe it's a great It's a great pastime and an important thing for today's younger generation to kind of grow up and be exposed to. It seems like it's less and less these days. Technology is everywhere, and so yeah, that's kind of how things evolved for me.
That's a great segue into one of my next questions. Was in your YouTube videos, I've seen your kids enjoying themselves, and I'm not sure whose kids. There's somebody's kids, but there's some kids in there that are having a blast, right? And it reminds me of when I was growing up, and obviously, you guys when you're growing up, and you mentioned Cubs and Beavers and Scouts and all that stuff, right? But that's one thing that I have noticed in your videos, like I say, is that the kids are having a blast. And how important is it to you to include your kids in your adventures and have them see the world the way that you guys do?
I mean, I guess I'll start with that one. I mean, for me, it's essential, really. I mean, we live in a world now where, and I'm guilty of this too, as much as the next person. Our cell phones kind of on us all the time, and, computers, technology, like, there was a time not that long ago where, you left work and you were gone from work, and work was at work and home was home. And then those lines have really been blurred over the last, especially the last 15, 20 years. And so for me, when I started my family and my wife and I had our first, it was important for us to make them see that side of things. There's a kind of a pull for today's younger generation into, the technology and the different things. And they're bombarded with things that are very different than what we were exposed to as kids. So the whole concept of getting outdoors and kind of, being in touch with that side of life is important for me, and important for me, for my kids to be aware of, because there's a certain reset that you have when you go out into, when you go out and you don't have a cell phone signal anymore, and it's just you and your family and or your friends, and all that other stuff is kind of like, well, I got no reception, so I'm not getting any phone calls. I'm not sitting wasting time on whatever it is, TikTok or social media or whatever. You're just enjoying the company of the people around you and the surroundings that you're in. And for me, it's vital for my kids to see that and learn it. And hopefully they really enjoy themselves at the age they're at. Hopefully as they get older, they gravitate to it. And, down the road, I'm the old grandpa that they drag out with their own kids somewhere to go camping. So.
Yeah, and for me, like I look at it like the same way Jared does. We align a lot of the ways in our views on that, but like I look at it as with my little guy, like you're instilling skills, you're instilling skill sets, confidence, you're putting them through reps, right? You're watching them problem solve out there in the bush. He generally builds, we get the kids to build the first campfire generally every trip is how it works out. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but it's I think the lessons that I learned out in the bush, just they foster that self-sufficiency, they foster the confidence. It's the exploration, like we have a certain trust level with our kids now that we can kind of let them wander off a little bit and know that they're not going to end up in a dangerous situation, and so they can go and they can explore. And we've done winter camping right in the middle of February, and the kids thrive there. We were equipped for the weather, and we let them know what the expectations were going to be. It was going to be different, but I think, and Jared would probably agree to this, that was probably one of our best outings that we've ever had. And I can't stress enough the confidence that comes with that when he goes back to school and he talks to his buddies, like, what did you do this weekend? Well, I went camping in the middle of the nowhere with no cell reception, way back in the woods. We could hear coyotes in the distance, and in February, to the point where, he's bragging about it to his teachers, and he's bragging about it to his friends, and trying to get them involved in it, and, I love that my kid's involved in youth sports, but I think this is, and the best conversations you're ever going to have with your kids are around a campfire. You're going to get to know them better. They're going to get to know you better. And with that kind of knowledge and that kind of like even handing down old corny stories about when I was a kid, he actually listens to them when we're around a campfire, instead of like shuttling them around town. You don't get that kind of in-depth. It's a level of intimacy with your kid where you can express those kind of feelings, because you kind of got a captive audience.
Yeah. And even when they do end up growing older, or, sitting around a campfire with, whether it be your kids or your friends or your family, older family, there's a bit of intimacy there, that where some of the best conversations I've ever had have been sitting around a campfire. And yeah, I agree 100% with everything you guys are saying. And earlier, Jared, you mentioned about it being a reset, being out in nature. And both Andrew and I are sitting here shaking our heads or nodding our heads, agreeing with you, because it totally is. And a lot of people don't realize it until they actually get out there, out there camping or just even hiking or kayaking or whatever. And I think we've really seen an increase in people out exploring in the last couple of years. I mean, COVID had a bit to do with it. RV sales and power sports sales were through the roof, right? And getting all kinds of people out there and exploring, which I think is wonderful. And as long as they respect everything, right? But I think it's great when people get out there and explore themselves. And I think you guys really nailed it there. For people with families that are just getting started into overlanding or camping with young kids, what advice can you give them to the parents?
One of the things for me would be the earlier the better. Like if that's a vision you have for your family 5 years down the road, start socializing them to the fact, like socializing them to the experience. Your first couple trips, you're not going to want to go into deep into the bush and have to worry about, an infant or a toddler around a campfire, but ease your way into it. And then it's a natural progression for them. And they're probably even, at that point in time, they're probably going to crave a little bit more adventure, a little bit more risk. And, but that would be like start early. And if you don't have that benefit, like let's say this is something you want to do, I would just say like expectation management and educate yourself. Because if you get out there and you have a negative experience, in the first handful of trips and you lose their interest, it's harder to get them back.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I guess my advice for people, when I talk, we recently did an outdoor show here in Halifax and had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, different walks of life. But whenever I run into somebody who's, got a young family and they're thinking about getting into it, or, they want to get into it, but they're not really sure how, I always tell them, like, just go. You have a certain number of basic things that you need. You need to make sure you have shelter. You need to make sure you have water. You need a way to stay warm, and you need some food. But I mean, obviously don't venture way off in the backcountry, but like, just go. You don't need, thousands of dollars of gear to get out and enjoy the outdoors. And I mean, it's, when I used to go as a kid, when I was like, 14 years old, I'd head out on my, on my dad's quad, and I'd go back in the woods, sometimes by myself, and I would take a ground sheet and a tarp and a sleeping bag, a little cooler on the back of the bike, and I'd go and I'd stay out overnight, have a little fire back in the woods, and no real gear to speak of, but it's just going, right? And all the amenities and all the stuff that are out there now, especially with the explosion of, overlanding and, whatever you want to call it, car camping or truck camping, whatever you want to refer to it as. I mean, at the end of the day, the explosion with the enthusiasm to get outside now, I just encourage people, like, just listen, make sure you know the basic safety stuff, make sure you have the basics, but you don't need a giant rooftop tent and awnings and all these things. Yes, they're great. Yes, they do allow you to thrive in those environments and really, really enjoy them and be comfortable while you're there. But just go, get your family outside. I don't know of a lot of people that regularly get their kids or their family outside and then come back and say, like, oh, that was terrible, right? Like, I hated every minute of that. A lot of people, when they get off, a lot of people, when they talk to Andrew and I, they think we're, it's becoming somewhat normalized now, oddly. But like, I remember when we did our first big winter camping trip, people thought we were crazy. Right? Like, what are you guys doing going out this time of year? But I mean, it's the kind of thing that, like, we're to the point now where our kids, my daughter asks me every week when we're going camping again, right? So, that would be my advice. Just get out there, expose them to it, get them, hook them early, and then you're good, right?
Exactly. I've always said that the best modification you can do to your vehicle is a full tank of gas and a map book. Right? Just get out and explore and get out and go. And you're 100% right. You don't need to have the $3,000 or the $5,000 rooftop tent. You don't need the scuttle and all that. When I was doing different setups on my Xterra, there's actually quite a while that I actually slept in the back of my Xterra, fold the back seats down. And, I
absolutely.
rooftop tent wasn't working with kayaks or I just too lazy to set up my tent, my ground tent or whatever. So yeah, there's quite a few nights where I just slept in the back of the Xterra, and you don't need, huge. I mean, it's good to have good quality gear. And once you decide that you want to do more of it, it's time to invest in good quality gear. But those $200 tent packages from Walmart, it's
Right.
worth looking at them just to try and see if you actually like it, right? So you'll like it better with
100%.
better gear, but
Yeah.
And I mean, you don't really know, part of the way you figure out what you need is by going out and needing it, right? You go out and it's kind of like, even today, like, I mean, I would say Andrew and I are quite well equipped, but we still have times where we'll be out there sitting around the campfire and I'll be like, what would be really nice if we had this, or, this would really add to the experience. But you get that from going out. It's kind of like, for me, I ground camped for years, and, it's what got me outside. And I have great memories of those times.
yeah, exactly. Even the rainy days, right? So, and I think going back to the family thing, one thing that I've noticed is that you mentioned earlier that the kids set up the fire, most of the time, and given the kids a task that they know they can do, but they know that when they pull in, that's their task, is to get the fire going, or to help mom with the tent or dad with, whatever, right? If they have a task that they know that they do every time, and it helps bring in some of that. So it's the same thing every time kind of idea, right? So.
Right. Yeah. A tasking for kids is an investment, right? Like they feel like they're part of it. Like they're part of the adventure. They're part of the considerations of what you're doing and where you're going. Like I encourage people, like if you're going out on a trip, especially with a family, like you kind of have to if you're just, like if I take my family out for a trip and I just do what I want to do, I mean, eventually it's going to be kind of like, yeah, no, Dad, we're good. What, you go this weekend and we'll stay home. Right. So, I mean, you got to talk to your kids and talk to your significant other, whoever's going camping with you. Like, what do you want to do on this trip? Like what brings you, what brings you back to zero and makes you happy, and incorporate those things. And that way everybody's invested and everybody has a part, and it just makes everybody, want to go out again next time. Right.
And I've even done in the past where, say like, 10 or 12-year-old would, okay, this is your weekend. What lake do you want to go camp at? And what meals do you want to do within reason, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But
you have to be careful about having the yes days, so to speak, right? Because then you go, who knows where you're going to
exactly. End up. But having that input, it gives them a sense of responsibility and it's excitement, right? They can, what are we going to do kind of idea. And actually talking about food, that's a very popular topic of discussion on the podcast. Some people grab a box of craft dinner or a prepackaged salad, and others go out and create like a 5-star worthy meal, right? How about you guys? Especially with families, it's a bit more involved, and sometimes it's just got to be clean and simple. And but what are you guys usually cooking when you guys are out camping?
I mean, I'll hit lead off on this because my meal prep is pretty short. I'm definitely a convenience guy, especially when it's like just me and the kids. I'm generally not doing big elaborate meals. I'm kind of a keep it simple kind of guy, within reason. I mean, if I'm going on a multi-day trip, I'm not going to eat, crap the whole time. Obviously, then you just don't feel good, and kids don't feel good, and that's no good. And certainly when my wife is with us, the meal quality improves drastically. But when you look at my style of camping and meal prep and eating, and compared to Andrew's, they are vastly different. I'll let him explain his process, because it's quite something to experience and witness.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a foodie, I guess, and I really enjoy my outdoor kitchen. I love cooking outdoors. I love, when it comes down to buying the gadgets, that's one of my, I probably have way too, I would say my outdoor kitchen and my camping kitchen rivals what we have in the house. So, I think I went a little too far. I think I've calmed down over the last year or so, but for me, I kind of put everything through the test of, can I prepare this ahead of time to save me some of the prep time or wasted time in the bush? And so I generally will stick to, there's an enchilada recipe that I really like that you do in a cast iron. The names escape me now. Like a cast iron pot you put on the fire, and then there's this is one of the things that my little guy looks forward to. It's just steak bites. Just take sirloin steak, you chunk them up, dump a thing of Italian dressing in, and then freeze it. And then by the time that you get to wherever you're going, it's usually, you just barbecue them up, and they're really tasty. But I enjoy that process of it. And there's one video on Facebook there or not Facebook, on YouTube, where I did like a seafood chowder with all like locally sourced type of food. And it was actually a mackerel that we had in the same meal that was caught down the road. And I really I enjoy that stuff. And my little guy, I don't know if you've ever had a mackerel. They're not the most delicate flavor. Like they're very strong, very oily, and he would never eat it at home. But since he caught it,
right,
and that's part of that ownership bit, right? And that self-sufficiency. Since he caught it, he almost had an obligation to the animal where he's like, well, I guess I got to eat this now. And he choked his way through it. But, I think he's at the point now where he looks forward to the meal.
To speak to Andrew's point, I'll be the first guy to say that I have thankfully benefited extensively from Andrew's preparation and cooking, because we'll be heading out, and for me, I'll have a couple of things thrown in the cooler ready to go, and Andrew will be like, oh, hey, I'm bringing this and this and this and this. And I'll be like, great. That sounds awesome. I definitely benefited from his love of cooking over the years, but
yeah, I think he's a guy I got to go camping with.
yeah. It's good to loop a couple foodies into your crew, right? If you can get those guys in there that love to cook, especially if they love cooking for not only themselves but for other people. I mean, that's just
exactly.
Awesome. Just make sure you throw them a few bucks at the end, because food prices.
Yeah, no doubt.
Obviously, yeah, it's good. It's good to contribute back, but that's definitely a nice benefit to have.
I did an interview with a Jeeper over here in BC by the name of Just Jeeping Adventures on YouTube, and him and his wife do a lot of really great meals, and one of them was a cinnamon bun pancakes, and I'm just like, they do all kinds of stuff like that, and I'm like.
Yeah. So one of the things I like. So do you know what a pie iron is? It's
yes.
Like a cast iron sandwich press that you put goodies in, and then you jam it in a campfire and you turn it continuously. So if you go to the store and you just get some of those Pillsbury cinnamon rolls or one of those pre-made cinnamon rolls, jam those in there and then carefully put them over a fire so you don't scorch them. That's living life right there. That's as good as it gets. Those pie irons are so versatile. You can make sweets in it. You can make sandwiches, Monte Cristos, everything. And again, a kid poking a stick or poking something into a fire, you're not going to get them any happier than that, especially when you can pull like a sandwich out of it or some kind of a dessert.
Never mind the kids. You can't get an adult any happier than that, right? I mean, I was out with a friend this weekend, and it was his 51st birthday, and we're all sitting there poking in the fire, right? And we're like, that's just life. And I agree with you on a comment about doing food prep as much as possible. Like, I'll put my potatoes in the microwave here at home so they're almost done, and so that they can cook. Yeah, they can cook at the same speed as other stuff, and go from there. I'm going to be getting into the cast iron stuff this year, and I've never really played with it much, but the pie piece is a good idea, and a skillet, and start with that. Right now, on that pie piece, when you put your dough in there, can you put like other stuff, like say blueberries or strawberries and stuff 100%. Like that?
Yeah, it's all going to be to what your preference is, and a lot of the times it might be like we've used jam before,
right?
The strawberries would take so long to kind of break down that your dough would get burnt by the time everything's settled around. But yeah, that's a really good idea. But I think you've got to be careful of how that works out.
Yeah, jam's a good idea. Yeah, that's good. And then just a little bit of butter on top when it comes out so it melts.
Yeah, and you got to make sure that now preparation is key, because if you do not use like a spray, like an oil spray or PAM or something, you're never getting it out, and it's going to be a mess. So that's, if I could give one piece of advice to the world listening right now, is to make sure you use a liberal amount of some kind of a cooking spray in there, because if not, you're going to be disappointed.
That's good to know, because I never thought about that.
There you go. Tips are free.
That's great. So earlier on, Andrew, you mentioned that you started off with Westphalia, and I've seen pictures and that of it, and then you moved into the Jeep. Have you still got the Westphalia?
I do. I get out. I get in and out in it a couple times a year, but it's relegated now to kind of a few road trips. When I go to a campground, I don't like cracking open the rooftop tent too much. So I'll take the Westie to a campground. and things like that now. So it's I feel like I'm kind of torn between two loves, because I love the Gladiator, I love the rooftop tent. I don't have enough time to entertain both for what they deserve. So, but I got the Westie in 2012, and I actually took it on a football road trip down to New York City, and I broke down in Bridgeport, Connecticut. So I have trust issues with it now. So I ended up putting it's got a Subaru swap in it. So I did that, and now it's a little bit more reliable, but it's still, I'll never forget that feeling of, pulling over on the I-95 into, parts unknown.
I think that's a Westphalia thing, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. But it's cool when you're in your 30s. It's not so cool when you're in your late, mid 40s, and your wife and kid are in there looking at you, wondering why they can't go on vacation. And you got to take the money that you're going to spend on vacation to get a new transmission.
Right. Yes. No, I was actually going to ask you about if you had a Subaru swap in there, and you mentioned that you did. Was that a big job, and was it worth it in the long run?
I think so. Yeah. So it was. I got my package from Rocky Mountain Westie in Colorado, and it basically has a mending plate for the EJ22 engine, the Subaru engine, and the stock transmission. So what happened when I actually did blow a transmission on the Cobequid Pass in Nova Scotia, because the old transmission couldn't take, because it's a huge horsepower increase. I think you go from 80 horsepower to like 125. And so there was a design flaw in the transmission, and I happened to find it as I'm gearing down a big mountain. Well, not a big mountain for BC terms, but for Nova Scotia terms, gearing down a big mountain, and it blew up. So, but yeah, like I love my Westie, and it's very utilitarian. Like, it's not going to win any car shows. It's got like a monster liner, bed liner on it for a paint job, and it's kind of a Frankenstein type of Westie, but it works perfectly for me. Like, I've got a family of 3. It suits us just fine.
I think they're great. And even going into the van life, the guys with the bigger vans as well, too. I think they're absolutely wonderful, especially if they just want to go from, provincial park to provincial park, or the odd rec site, that's a little bit off the beaten trail. And I have to admit that I've looked at vans a lot. And there's a company here in town that I actually started my 4x4 career with, or my working in 4x4 shops, and they do van conversions. So I've always been, ever since 30 years ago when I started in a shop that did van conversions, that shop is still around today. And it's always been in the back of my mind. And they put out some incredible vehicles with these 4x4 van conversions. Yeah. And I'm like, it just, but they are quite big, and, but they do suit a purpose. And it's just
my dream would probably be some kind of a off-road capable van, because I do kind of get spoiled in the van, because when it's really rainy and really windy, the pop top on the Volkswagens, they move a little bit and you can hear it, but when you're coupled up down underneath, you don't notice it too much. But if you're in a rooftop tent on a really windy, rainy night, it's noisy, right? And you don't get that in the van. So I kind of want to find something in the middle. Especially in my senior years, when I start getting there, I want to get into something a little more capable, but also something that gives you that level of shelter and protection in the harsh weather.
Yeah, 100%. Like, say the guys at Clydesdale Conversions here in town, it's just some of the vehicles they put out, whether it be ambulance bodies or it's just so many. They've done some full size Class C RVs and stuff like that as well. And it's like, where are you actually going to need 4-wheel drive on a big RV like that? But it's still cool, and I think I would still end up having another vehicle like Gladiator or a Tacoma that I can take out with the boys to go to the Alpine with. But as you mentioned, as we're getting older, there's a certain comfort that we want.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now you've got the Gladiator. What do you got for mods and setup for camping on your Gladiator?
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of mods. I went with, like, right out of the gate, I went with some rims. I got some wheels for it so it could handle the bigger tires. So I think I've got Fuel, I don't know what the name of them, but Fuel aluminum rims, 17-inch. And then I wrapped them with some Toyos MTs. Yep. So really happy with them. They're wearing really well. They're chunky, like you hear it when you're on the highways. But, they're no good just for, I shouldn't say no good, because they're a good tire, but when it's a little bit icy here in Nova Scotia with the freezing rain, they basically turn into hockey pucks. like cold hockey pucks, and there's not a lot of grip. So there are times when I would walk by the Gladiator and go to my wife's RAV4 on the ice days. I didn't have a lot of trust in it. But yeah, and then I got a Smittybilt winch on the front, and I have a rack that I made on the back with some Molly panels and fold up access panels so I can get in the back of the bed.
Right. And then you got rooftop tent, I assume, as well?
Yeah, I'm in transition right now. I'm waiting to pick for which one. Jared's smiling because we've got some in stock here. We're trying to figure out if I'm going to take one or not. So I think I'm going to transfer, like you said, you probably, from my previous comments where I was like, I get a little annoyed by all the fabric flapping around all the time on windy days. So the majority of the time, it's me and the little guy will go out. So I think for now, while he's still little, we might end up going towards like a hard shell and bite the bullet and get one of those.
They're a lot more money, but just so easy to set up, and like you say, a lot quieter as well too, right? So there's pros and cons to each one, and we can get into that in a second. But yeah, it's, I don't know, I've done a couple different versions of things, and eventually I might settle on something, but there's nothing perfect out there, right? So yeah. So Jared, let's talk about your Jeep.
Yeah, I got a 2012 JK. I bought it new in 2012, and it's kind of been behind my wife and my kids, and probably the dog. The love of my life for the last, to 10 years, been on lots of adventures in it. It's not super heavily modded. I mean, I've got, the steel front and rear bumpers and same as Andrew's, a Smittybilt winch on it. And then I've got a 2.5-inch lift on it. I don't run 35s on it because I've never done a re-gear on it. And I find, for what I do for wheeling, I honestly probably don't need 35s. There's been a few times maybe where I would have liked to have them, but overall, I run mine on 33s and that suits me for what I need. So I've got when I bought it, they were called Cargo Master. Now they're Adventure Rack Systems, but they bought out my Metal Cloak. But I got one of their racks on it, which is, if anybody's looking for like an exoskeleton rack for a Jeep, I mean, those things are bulletproof, great racks. So they have a massive static and dynamic load capacity and all kinds of different attachments and stuff for them. So got that on it. I mean, inside I run a vector bar on the inside for all my nav. And then for me, I mean, as far as the actual vehicle goes, I do run a Garmin Explorer for satellite comms because although it is kind of hard to get too far out of cell reception here because we are a small province, we do kind of seek that out. So we do have that for the safety side of things. And sure, I don't really have a whole lot else on it for modifications, to be honest. I mean, the Jeeps in general are certain vehicles out there. The Jeeps, a lot of the Toyotas, they're very capable off the lot, right? So some people like to modify them because they just want to modify them or they use them that way. Some people just like the way it looks. Yep. I mean, let's be honest, but I've never really had too many situations that have driven me to do anything too crazy for modifications to it. But it's been a reliable vehicle for me. I've driven it 11 years now, and it's never few little hiccups here and there, but it's never failed me. It's been very reliable. So
yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize what stock vehicles are capable of, and it's really. I'm in the same boat as you guys. I mean, I'm running the Tacoma, but I haven't done a lot of mods to it because for the majority of my time is going back and forth to work or Forest Service roads, and there is lots of times where I pop it into 4 low, but I luckily usually am smart enough that if something looks too extreme that I will back away and go another route. But I've also got lots of friends with winches and they can pull me out if need be. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize how capable a stock Jeep or a stock Tacoma is. And it goes back to that whole thing. I mean, the best mod is a full tank of gas, right? To get out there and explore.
Yeah.
And so I'm in the same boat with you guys. I've done big modified vehicles before, and this is what suits my lifestyle now, right? I still get out there and explore, but you don't necessarily need to have the 37s or the 40s. Although I do have to admit, like we've got KC250 coming on in a bit. So
yeah, he's got the monster.
He's got the Demonator,
so,
right? With a 840 horsepower on 40s. And we've been talking back and forth, and he was going to come on earlier, but he had just trying to get ready for the Easter Jeep Safari, right? So now we're just trying to rebook with our schedules. But I would love to have a rig like his, just to have a rig like his.
Yeah.
But in reality, is it that useful?
Right. I mean, that's always the question, right? Like you look at a guy like him, and I mean, he's using that thing, man. Like he's putting it through his paces, and he's using it the way he's built it to be used. I mean, so like I say, I mean, I think people people in general, what I always kind of encourage people to do, because we talk to people sometimes and they're like, oh, I've got this and I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do that. And it's like, okay, well, that's all great. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But, why? Like what,
Yep.
what like you've gone and bought whatever you've bought, a newer generation Tacoma or a 4Runner or a Jeep. Like, man, those things are capable. And especially if you spend some time and you hone your skills with operating that vehicle, they can go a long way and they can get into a lot of places. And so, I mean, yeah, it's kind of the same thing as the gear setup.
Mhm.
Like, figure out what you need. If you've been doing this for years and you know what, I want a 4-inch lift and I want it on 35s and I want all these things because I use it this way and I'm going to use it this way. By all power to, by all means, go ahead and do what you're going to do. But, for people just getting into it, I kind of always encourage them to like learn your vehicle first, because when you get into extensive modifications, and if you are putting that thing through its paces and you're back 70 clicks in the woods and, you snap something, or if you're, worse, if you're in a place where maybe you're out of province or you're away on a longer trip and something breaks, it's harder to fix that if you have like a really specialty piece. And that's going to be a consideration when you're looking at, especially if you're getting into longer term trips over large distances. And if you're crossing borders and those kinds of things, it's all stuff you got to take into account.
Definitely. Our listeners are probably getting tired of me saying this, but I keep on saying that everybody should drive their vehicle stock for 6 months, right? Learn a vehicle and learn your capabilities. When I hopped from my lifted TJ with lockers and that into a stock Xterra, when I moved into the family mobile, before I lifted in that, I had to learn how to drive all over again. Yeah. I think everybody should drive their vehicle stock for a little bit just to learn the capabilities of the vehicle and yourself, right? So
yeah, that's a great advice.
And it helps you appreciate too, because there is a lot of time and money, dedicated to these upgrades, and it'll help you in the long run appreciate what you did, and it'll actually help guide your decision making in the future. Do I need to do this? Well, I did this and I didn't really have the outcomes I thought I was going to. So when it comes time to making that next decision down the road at midnight when you're laying in bed on one of those doing some late night shopping, it's going to help guide those decisions, because everything seems to be at least $1,000.
Yeah, unfortunately. Now, in Nova Scotia, and I guess on the East Coast in general, what is out there for, say, 4x4 clubs or Facebook groups that if somebody was sort of wanted to get into this overlanding or into four-wheeling or exploring, is there some clubs or something that you guys can recommend that people talk to or hook up with?
Yeah, I mean, Nova Scotia and New Brunswick both have very active Jeep clubs. Just the Nova Scotia and the New Brunswick Jeep Club is what they're called. They're very active. They organize regular runs and have people involved with them who are very, very knowledgeable of both the vehicles and places you can take them to kind of try them out. A lot of people, when they're getting into the 4-wheel drive or the off-road world, are concerned about, well, I'm going to go, this is supposed to be a good trail. I'm going to go do this, but, it's really not something you should do stock, or it's not something that you should really go down by yourself. You don't have any recovery gear and it's something like that. And then for those situations, we do have an off-road recovery group here on Facebook. I don't know the name of them offhand, but there is a group. It's a fairly large group, and people can post in there if they've run into a snag and they need a hand getting pulled out. It's a great little group. And as far as the overlanding scene, a lot more, I guess, wide array of people. If you want to branch out from Jeep specific, there's Atlantic Canada Overlanding and there's a Nova Scotia Overlanding groups on Facebook, and both of them have a good following of people who are getting out there and exploring and generally are very welcoming in terms of people. We get people in those groups posting all the time saying, hey, I'm coming to Nova Scotia this summer. Can you recommend some tracks or recommend some campsites and stuff? And I mean, that stuff is always hit and miss, right? Nobody wants to give away their golden site, but generally people are pretty helpful with recommendations. And it's always good a great thing I think about social media and the boom of it is for all the kind of envy you can get from social media in terms of like, oh man, look what Wes has done to his rig now. Like I need to do that. And that side of social media, there's also a side of it where even though you may never have been someplace ever, you can reach out to a group of people who are like-minded and get some information and in a pinch, reach out to that group for help if you need it, especially if you're traveling away from home, right? So yeah, there's a few groups that way, and they are quite active and lots of very knowledgeable people involved in them.
Yeah, they're pretty well organized too. Like they've got trail guides assigned when they go on runs. I think they've got like safety members that will assign to make sure everyone has to goes out with proper gear, like recovery points in their vehicles, and they're the ones that kind of police themselves as far as if you have a stock vehicle, you probably shouldn't go on this one. And I think that they're pretty successful on the weekends. There's also one called Private Off-Road Nation that's out this way too. I don't know if you've
I've heard of that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're pretty. I think it's all over the place, but I think it was either founded in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, and it's a fairly large group also, which is all different shapes and sizes of off-road vehicles.
I always remember that one by the acronym.
Yes, clever marketing, to say the least. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's talk about the Roam Wild Overland store. From my understanding, it basically derived from lacking being able to find any quality gear in Nova Scotia. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I mean, kind of how the whole thing started really was, I won't name names. Andrew and I were planning a trip, and I had decided that I wanted a piece of gear to kind of add to my setup before the trip. And I thought I was good. I have a good month and a half in advance. I went and I ordered this thing, and it wasn't coming from a Canadian store. It was coming from an American store. And so I bought it, and the price was the price. And then, I waited, and then there was the shipping, and that added a little bit. And then I got the call for my duties and my taxes and all that kind of stuff. Yep. And as it, I had the tracking and the trips coming up, and I'm like, geez, I heard this thing 6 weeks ago. Is it going to get here in time? and we're getting closer and closer and closer. And then, D-Day comes and we're leaving, and I don't have my part. And so we took off, and literally I said to Andrew, I think the very next morning, I got my little notification like, oh, your parcel's been delivered. I was like, oh, that's awesome. One day too late, right? But, I think on that trip, that kind of sparked the conversation of like, by the time I got this thing, it took a long time. It was coming from away. I ended up paying very close to double what the sticker price was on it by the time it went through the taxes and the fees and the duties and the shipping and all that kind of stuff. And, we just kind of had the conversation on that trip. Like, there's got to be, there's nobody offering this stuff in Atlantic Canada. And so that's kind of where it started from. And from there, we just really tried to, we've had kind of a comical set of circumstances because we kind of decided we were going to go like, okay, we're going to do this, and we do this, and this to get this in line. And we registered the business and did all that kind of stuff. And then COVID hit, and then it was like, okay, well, maybe not. And then some time went by, and we transitioned, and we lined up a couple of vendors first with products that we trusted. That was kind of something we set very early on, is that we weren't going to carry or promote anything to people that we didn't trust and use ourselves. So we've started small. We've grown slow for that reason. We've had lots of opportunities to bring on different product lines that for whatever reason, either we didn't have the experience with them to really be like, yeah, you know what? Let's bring that in. We just felt like we couldn't speak intelligently to customers and be honest with them about our experience. And so we kind of have a tendency to want to run the gear for a while ourselves before we commit to bringing it in, because all of this stuff is expensive, right? And I think I probably am similar to 99% of people in Canada, that we don't have unlimited funds to buy whatever we want, whenever we want. Some of these things are major purchases. So, we don't want to sell something to somebody and then have them a year later be like, oh yeah, that broke, or that didn't work out, or didn't work the way it was supposed to. If you're going to invest the time and money to save for something and do your research and buy something, we want to make sure you're getting the use out of it for a long time. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And we just kind of are slowly picking away. And yeah,
we're trying to put a lot of emphasis on like customer service and like aftercare when we sell something, because the way I look at it, Atlantic Canada is small regardless. And so when you even pare that down even further to the overland community, it's even smaller. So word travels fast, right? So we want to make sure that, we're putting our best foot forward. We're standing behind our products. And in order for us to do that, we've got to be confident that we believe in those products. And if we do have to go through any kind of like warranty issue, that we're right there, like in step with the customer. So I think that's one of the reasons that we're really picky. And like Jared says, like, and you probably get it with your podcast, vendors are constantly reaching out to you either for plugs or for, try this or try that. And we're trying to maintain our focus. and do what we do really well. And if that means that we're kind of concentrating on a smaller subset of items, well, then so be it. But, we're really happy with the brands that we have in. And like Jared said, like, we use them before we sell them.
And I think that's huge. I mean, looking at the brands that you carry, Darche, Pelican, Waterport, Claymore, Lights. I mean, everything that you guys carry is good quality stuff. And to me, it's a lot easier to be confident in selling something to a potential customer if you've used it before.
Yeah.
And especially going to say something like rooftop tents. There's so many different versions. I mean, how do you pronounce it? Is it Darche?
Darche.
Yeah. So they've got different versions, and even their awnings, they've got different versions. And you guys have probably used some of their products. And you're talking about doing a change on your Jeep earlier, Andrew. And the fact that you guys can say, you know what, yeah, I like this, but here's something that I wasn't super, because there's no product that's absolutely perfect for every situation. Right.
Yeah.
So the fact that you guys have tried the products and you can help that customer make that decision, what product may be better for them. Right. So,
yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think that's where a combination of some time doing it without the business side, the business side totally aside, this is a passion for both Andrew and I, and we want to grow this community like this. We really feel like this is important, getting outside, kind of exploring and just kind of resetting, so to speak. We think that's a really important thing. And we try to encourage people to do that. And like I said earlier, like, you don't necessarily need all the gear, but it does help you to thrive. There's no doubt if you're going out for a week-long trip and you've got something like an awning on the side of your vehicle for those 2 days that it pours rain, that makes a big difference. But is it essential? No. And it's one of those things that, we really take pride in talking to people and finding what's best for them. If that's something we've got, that's great. If it's not something we got, I mean, we're perfectly honest with people, which is that, what, this sounds like this would be a better option for you for what you want. We can do this, but these are the pros and cons of it. It's not all about the bottom line for us. It's about encouraging people to get into the segment. Like I said earlier, it's about making sure people are getting good value for their dollar and happy with the product at the end of the day. We don't want people to walk away and be like, oh yeah, look at this, whatever that I got. And then 6 months later, like, oh, it broke or whatever. And the person that sold it is nowhere to be found. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's important to us. And I think that kind of pulls back a little bit on our East Coast roots. Like I said, people are expecting us to kind of be that kind of foundation on the back end of it. And we really strive for that.
Yeah. Like I say, there's something about going to, say, a big box 4x4 store versus a smaller shop like you guys yourselves. I mean, a lot of times some of these, folks may have not even been out camping with a rooftop tent or a, awning or whatever. Right. So the fact that you guys use your products, it just makes a world of difference, I think. So I see that you guys carry the Pelican coolers, top of the line coolers, lots of different sizes. What's your own personal favorite?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah. So I guess I've got the big boy. I think the giant one with the wheels on it.
Okay. Yep.
So Jared, refresh my memory. Jared's a product expert on this stuff.
The 80, it's the 80 wheels.
The 80. So I've got that. It was one of the first purchases I made. And before that, I had another brand that was also a premier cooler. But I got rid of that one because I wanted to move to Pelican. And I found that it's a perfect size for me. Now, keep in mind, I don't have a fridge. I'm not using a fridge right now. So I rely 100% on my cooler. I feel like the functions of the Pelican coolers are just, they're head and tails above the competition. Like they've got locking latches on them. They've got tie down points where you can still access your drinks and your food inside. So you can strap it down to the bed of your truck and still access what you need to inside, because there's recesses. There's just little details where there's recesses built into the bottom lip where you can put a ratchet strap in there, or you could put, I don't say a bungee cord, it's probably not a good idea, but a ratchet strap, and you can secure it down. But I think my favorite would be the 20. So there's a 20, which is bigger than our lunch. We have a 14, which is what you would see like a construction worker with on a job site. But there's a 20, which is a lot taller. And so I have that. I've got specific like tie downs. I've got a 15-foot like fishing boat. I have the tie downs on that where it basically lives there year round. when I'm fishing, and then when I'm not there, it just fits in the back of the car or the truck. And I find like that's the one that's with me the most. But the utility now, the 80 is very big, and when it's fully loaded with like ice and food and everything, it can get a little bit heavy. But for me,
Yeah.
the way that I can kind of throw it around, it's perfect. I don't think it's for everybody. Now we do have a smaller version of that, which is a little more nimble, we'll call it, and that would probably be the best of both worlds, I would say. But I can only have so many coolers, my wife tells me. So I think I'm on the verge of an issue at this point, but I don't have a fridge yet.
I've got a fridge. I've got a Dometic, and I'll be honest with you, I'm out maybe 3 days max kind of idea. And I'm like, was it actually worth all that extra money versus a good quality cooler? If I was out for like a week, I think it would definitely. But, for a 2 or 3 day weekend, I'm still I've had it for 3-4 years now, and I'm still bouncing around. Was this actually, a smart decision? It goes back to that, what are you using it for thing, right?
Did you ever try to take a carton of eggs out of a big cooler that has ice sloshing around in it? It's not cool. Enjoy your fridge. Right?
I do. It's just
but like the cold dry is that, to me, I'm just being indecisive right now. Jared just got a Dometic that he can probably shed some light on, but I'm just being picky right now on which way we want to go.
Yeah, for me, I mean, as far as my favorite Pelican cooler, I mean, man, like, they really are a great product line. It all depends on what you use it for. I mean, up until, 3 weeks ago when I just got a new Dometic 95, and, I was plugging my 70 everywhere for trips. It's a great cooler, and, tons of space, super right. The biggest thing for me about the Pelican coolers is I'm hard on my stuff, man. Like I don't baby my stuff, and coolers, especially, you're dragging them around and smashing them off rocks and everything else. And the Pelican coolers are just rock solid. They really are. You got a lifetime warranty on them. You can beat the crap out of them and they keep going. And so the 70 for a long time, but honestly, the one I use the most is my little 14. I take that to work every day as my lunch bucket. I get made fun of because it's a pretty beefy lunch bucket, but it keeps my stuff cold all day long. They have awesome retention, and I use that. And it's got a lot of little features. It's got a little dry lid in the top of it, and it comes with a little basket in it that you can kind of. So I think that's probably my favorite one. It's the smallest of the crew, but I use that thing every single day, and I get a ton of use out of it. And I also have a 30, which is kind of in between the two. I love the 30 as well. The only thing with the 30 I found is that if I'm going out by myself for a weekend, great. If it's, if I'm dragging the whole family out, it's pretty hard to get all your cold food in a 30 quart cooler. So that's why I ended up eventually moving to the 70, and that thing's been rock solid. But as far as your debate, honestly, I mean, we sell the Pelican coolers. They are a great product, and if someone wants a cooler, I'd recommend a Pelican all day long. A fridge is amazing. I had a different brand of fridge before my Dometic.
Yep.
It didn't work quite as well as what I would have liked it to. But even on short trips, I would tell people, if you're going out on even if you're going on short trips, but if you're going regularly, I really think they do pay for themselves, because even a couple of days, you can get some food loss in a cooler, right? Just not so much because it goes bad, but just because, like, if you've got, like Andrew said, like a carton of eggs, like it just gets damp in a cooler, right? It's hard to keep it dry. That dry cool is really a nice advantage. So the nice thing about the fridges that I find is that and we don't currently carry any fridges, we're working on that, but that's something that you can take your stuff, and any food you don't use, you take it home and you put it back in your fridge, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no waste there. And over time, if you're going out enough, I think that's paying for itself over time.
Yeah, my fridge stays in my vehicle, and it's right behind the driver's seat. I got a 2-door Tacoma, and so it's popped behind the driver's seat, and it's perfect there. And I agree that it does make sense, but still, sometimes I'm like, was it worth it? But yeah,
it is a big step for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the cooler, like with everything, and it kind of goes back to the themes I was talking about earlier, is that preparation is key, right? So when you're packing a cooler, and let's say you're going to use, like, Pelican has ice packs that they sell. that are very, very, really effective. They stay frozen for a long time. They keep your food cool. So that will solve some of the water intrusion issues like we were talking about with like bulk ice.
Yeah.
But, the preparation that you put into packing. So anything that can be frozen for your trip, you should freeze it a couple days before, put it in your cooler. And then I think when they talk about like optimal cooler, like to set yourself up for the most success, before you leave and before you fill your cooler, you're supposed to put like ice in it to bring it down to temperature to get started before you even leave the driveway.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah, if you want the optimal performance of your cooler, you have to do those things. And I've done it sometimes and not done it sometimes, and you do notice a difference. Like there's a huge difference there, and it only makes sense, right? If you can bring in the internal, because your cooler's going to be room temperature or worse when you're packing it, and that heat has to go somewhere, and it's going to go into your food if you don't do it properly. So some of the tips you can do is just freeze 2 liter bottles of like empty 2 liter bottles of pop or soda.
Yep.
Your deep freeze, and then throw those in there the day before, and that'll get the temperature down, and then you can pack your food in, and then you can expect to have a little bit better success. But the Pelican coolers, they're thick walled, they're durable, and like Jared said, very rarely are they in the inside of any one of our vehicles. I think Jared used to strap his to the very front of his trailer, so he'll be getting like road debris thrown at it and gravel that he kicks up, and it looks good as new. So they're super rugged, and they're one of my favorite products that we carry.
They're versatile too. That's the thing, right? Like say you can throw it into your boat or stuff like that, whereas you're not going to be taking your Dometic along on your boat.
No, 100%.
Yeah. So very, very versatile. The Waterport water tanks interest me. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, there's like a black plastic water tank that you pressurize with air, and then you use the supplied nozzle for showering or whatever, right?
Yeah. The water ports are a great little product. They come in 3 different sizes. They have a little, they call it the Go Spout, which is a 2 gallon. And then they have the day tanks, which is like 3.8. And they got the big weekender, they call it, which is an 8 gallon tank. But yeah, they're a food safe tank. So, all the water that comes out, you can use that for cooking or cleaning or whatever else you want to use it for. And yeah, you load them up and then they pressurize. The way they pressurize is kind of cool. So they do have the option of like, they come with they shouldn't say they all come, but some of them come with like a hand pump that's on the cap. So you can pump and add pressure that way. I'm not going to lie. If you want to pump it up that way, you go to it. But, you're going to have some, you're going to have some strong arms by the end of the weekend. That's more of a top up feature when you're out and about. But the really cool thing about the Waterport is that they come with a hose up to a 16-foot hose, and they come with connectors for your home hose. And all you have to do is plug that in. And when you charge that tank, it self-pressurizes. So you put the cap on the top, you fill it, the tank self-pressurizes as you fill it with water, and you disconnect that line and your tank is pressurized. And that, generally speaking, you'll get well over half of your water out before you see any kind of pressure fade on that. They also have a chuck on the side of it. A lot of people who are going out and hitting trails hard and stuff, they already have the capacity to air down and air up on their vehicles. Yeah. So you can attach a compressor to that chuck and recharge it that way if you want as well. But for me, I run both. I have a day tank and a weekender, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm just going out in the Jeep, or for me, I generally tow a trailer. And when I haul that, I have my 8 gallon on that, but I charge that thing before I leave. And it's generally making it all the way through the weekend without a recharge at all. So, they're a great little system for having potable water pressurized with you. There's nothing quite like, and I'm sure anybody that goes camping regularly will relate to this, but when you've got one of those days in, July or August, you're out in the woods and you've been kind of, whatever you've gone for a hike, whatever you've gone for, and, the evening's coming, you're hot and sweaty all day, you're drying up. There's nothing better than being able to, even if it's a 45 or 60 second shower, but to be able to rinse off at camp before you, transition into your, down for the night or into your evening clothes, whatever. It's just, it's a pretty awesome concept, and it's a great product. I'm very, very happy with mine.
Yeah.
And especially with kids.
Yeah. I'd add on with like what Jared was saying, like, Pelican's durable, but Waterport, like when you mount these, they are substantial units. It's simple technology. It's very well planned out. Like, it's very intuitive, but simple tech and very, very, very rugged.
Yeah. Yeah, I think from everything I've read about them, the product itself is a wonderful product. And I think, like, going back to camping with kids thing, especially, I mean, you got kids that are spending the day in the beach or whatever, right? Just give them a quick little rinse and they're golden.
And those like that, it's a creature comforts that are going to draw, like, my wife in particular, like she likes camping, but she does enjoy the creature comforts too. Like she does enjoy those little luxuries where, in the bush, it's a luxury, right? Like having, it does warm up fairly good here, even in Nova Scotia with, our climate. It's not cold by any means. On really good days, it comes out warm. Right. Yeah. So it's just it's the black design, like they're designed to absorb the heat, the energy from the sun, heat up the water, and anything from washing dishes to rinsing off sandy feet.
And speaking of the creature stuff, let's go back to the Darche brand. Their chairs are so comfortable. I've got a few friends with them, and they are such a comfortable chair. Yeah, they're an expensive chair. Yeah, they're $100 or $150 or whatever they are, but they're so comfortable and durable. They're made to last, right?
Yeah, 100%. They are, and I mean, a big factor for me, everybody doesn't have this problem, but I'll speak from my own experience. I'm a big guy, and I can't tell you how many camping chairs over the years I have destroyed.
I've seen.
Yeah, exactly. I think anybody who's been around me for more than a few minutes has probably seen me destroy one. And the reality is, it's hard to find. It's hard to find, full down camping chairs out there that have that kind of robust, firm platform that's gonna really hold up over time. I mean, I've had my Darche chairs now for a couple of years. I have the 380, which is actually designed on the old Airbus seats. So, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4" and I'm well north of 250 pounds. So, it's one of those things that they're comfortable, they're super rugged, they last. And you're right, Wes. I mean, they are not cheap. You're not going to walk down to, a local big box store and pick one up for $35 or $40. But the reality is you're going to buy it and it's going to be there and it's going to work. And I always relate. It's kind of funny because when I first got into, back into camping and kind of, getting gear and stuff, I had some things that I bought and I would buy I want that, and what's the best price I can find on something, and I would buy that. It didn't take me a real long time to kind of scale back to the same thing that I do for any kind of tools that I buy. Yep. Heeding the advice of my dad from years ago, what? Buy once, cry once, right? Spend the money up front, get something good. It will last, and versus going back and buying it again in a year or two or whatever. So, that really applies to those chairs. They are awesome.
Yeah, I mean, how many times do you buy those $29.99 chairs, right? Before they may end up one summer or half a summer, and then you got to buy another one, and it's the quality of them, and like I say, it's super comfortable as well too. So,
yeah, I'm really impressed with Darche overall. Like their whole product line is, I found they hit the nail on their head. Like prior to partnering with them through Roam Wild, like I had an awning, like another premier brand awning on my van that I used, and ARB. So it's another Australian brand, really well regarded in the off-road industry. And I wanted to swap that one out because I saw the Darche one, and I wanted to get it installed and use it. So when you look at the subtle little differences, so this is the same type of, it's like the vinyl bag with the heavy duty zipper that goes around the awning. So you guys have all seen those before, but it's got subtle little differences in it where the ARB, maybe because they were, first around the block with them and there's been some time to improve on it, but it's got a lot of subtle little differences that make setup and storage a lot easier for one person, which is always a challenge with those roll up type awnings, right? Yep. So that, they've transitioned to where, you can put the arms back up inside the console, like the two support arms in the front. They get their own dedicated channel, I guess, in that aluminum structure that goes across, which, like, a small detail like that is just, that's what I love about that brand, is that they do take that extra time to make those small improvements. I'm really impressed so far with the like overall quality of that awning, and way less expensive than the competition.
Yeah, and they have they have a lot of awnings available.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ones. And I definitely, if you're on the East Coast, I definitely recommend going and checking out, like, your website has all the information on it. So, if people on the East Coast, definitely look at, Roam Wild Overland. It's .com, is it correct?
Yeah.
.com, yeah. And because there's lots of information on there as well too. But the biggest thing, I think, that from my understanding, is also talking to you guys too, and getting feedback from you guys before making a purchase, right? And making sure that's a good purchase for you guys. I do have a note here from a gentleman on Instagram, NOS Overland. He saw that you guys are coming on board, and he did want me to give a shout out to an event that they've got happening in July. And so I told him I would. And so basically, I'm just going to read what he sent to me. But if anybody has any questions, they can definitely talk to NOS Overland on Instagram. And he said, we're a group from Great Britain, but currently we have 12 to 15 people across 7 to 8 rigs from all over Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and even a couple from Quebec, already signed up, ready to go. It's from July 1st to the 9th, leaving from the North Sydney Ferry Terminal. It'll be a mix of on-road and off-road driving, self-sufficient, off-grid camping, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, anybody with a 4x4 and frame-mounted recovery points, welcome. Basically, there's a group on Facebook, or a page and a group event on Facebook called Storm the Rock 2023 Newfoundland trip. So that, I guess, would be the way where to go to find out more information.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, there's lots of overlanding and Jeep clubs over that area as well too, right? So if people want to go exploring, this is just one event, and I have no affiliation with the person setting it up, so I don't know if it's a good event or a bad event or what they're like. But
I'm actually showed that I'm interested in that event, and I've been kind of following along. So, like I said, like small community, right? Like that's the thing about out here. So. Yeah, I have been following along, and Jared and I have been bouncing it back and forth for quite some time. We do have to, I want to get to Newfoundland to do the West Coast for sure, because Gross Morin it's like, it's a completely different environment than we have here in Nova Scotia. Cape Breton comes a little close, like the Cape Breton Highlands, if you've ever seen them or seen photographs, it also feels like you're in another part of the world when you're there. But Gross Morin is even a step above that, I would say, as far as it being.
Yeah, that's one of the areas they said they plan on hitting: Gross Morin, Twilling Gate, Iceberg Alley, and more. So
absolutely.
Sounds like a fun event to get out and explore areas that you haven't been around before, right? So
no, absolutely. And Andrea and I actually had discussed trying to make it work to go on that trip, because it sounds like a wicked trip.
Yeah,
just didn't work out for us timing wise, but and that's the nice thing about Nova Scotia, is that the community does, in that instance, I think that's just a couple of people who wanted to go on an adventure, and they threw it out to the group, and now they've grown a little group to go, which is awesome, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And hopefully that, not everybody wants to go in a group that big, but I mean, to me, like, that's a great opportunity for somebody maybe who is just getting into it and wants to learn more. And as long as you meet the requirements that they have for the terrain they're going to be tackling, if people want to get out, that's a great opportunity to go out, meet people who are like-minded. You can learn a lot that way, right? And we talked earlier in the podcast about getting to know your vehicle and getting to know your needs and wants in the field, and making the right decisions for you. And that can also be a great way to do it. You can sometimes cut a lot of time off that process if you talk to people who have been there and done it, and like, okay, well, you run this. Why do you run that? Well, because of this, and this. Yep. Oh, I didn't even know that. Right. So yeah, that sounds like a great trip. And I hope those guys take lots of video and pictures for us to watch.
I hope so. So again, it's the Storm the Rock 2023 Newfoundland trip, created by Todd Breton. Check it out on Facebook. I'll look it up, and I'll put in the show notes as well too, for everybody to check out. So the last question I have for every guest is, what Canadian would you like to listen to on the 4x4 Canada podcast?
So for me, I guess I'll go first on this. For me, I don't know if you've had him on yet or not, but Nick Scott from Adventure Trail Gear. I mean, man, we carry their products. he's Canadian based. He's making everything himself, and he is pumping out some, he's really growing fast, and he's pumping out some awesome gear,
he's on my list for sure. And I definitely want to talk to him. And for those people that don't know about adventure trail gear, can you maybe give him a heads up as to, like, it's not like he does a lot of soft products, I would call it, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, he does. For us, he does a lot of different stuff actually, but for us, we carry, he carries some propane mount bags. He carries some fire extinguisher mounts. But his big thing for us, at least, is the spare tire and the tailgate bags.
Yep.
And man, I'm telling you, I've run other bags. These things are awesome, top quality, very, very well built. Mine's been on the back tire of my Jeep for just short of 2 years, and I'm talking like summer, winter, like it's never come off. My Jeep does not live in a garage. It's outdoors. It's in the woods. It's on trails. That thing looks like the day I bought it. Like it is super well built, I can't speak highly enough of the stuff that Nick's putting out, man. Like they're a great little venture, super, super nice guy, and great products.
Yeah. And just to comment on what Jared, like Nick did a great job choosing even things like the devil's in the details, right? So his hardware, they work, the plastics clips that you use is like secure bags, clothes and stuff. The cold weather, they're fine. Hot weather, they're fine. They're durable. The zippers are heavy duty. Like he does all the little things really well. And I think when you're getting like, let's say, a spare tire bag or a tailgate bag, you want to make sure that you're not in the middle of the trail somewhere and something snaps off, or you look in your rearview mirror and you see it, 100 feet behind you. Because I think Jared was talking about, he had some other brands there that they rot. They actually, the sun rots them and the UV damage. And like, I'm the same. I have a tailgate bag on the Gladiator, and it doesn't come off. And I use it for everything from garbage to, if I run out of room in the back of my truck, I stuff things in there. And I've had a full water jug in there before, like to take back to the backcountry. And, you can tell how high quality it is if you're using it for something it's not designed for, and it's still that's a job. So, I think Nick is a good answer for Jared, or for us, because, he's been a good partner to us, and he puts out really good product.
Yeah, I've been looking at his stuff for a while, and it's been really neat seeing his product line grow. And everything I've heard has been good about the quality in that. So he's definitely on my list, and I've got a big list, but it's growing more and more. And I'm trying to spread it out between, companies and YouTube overlanders and racing and different things like that. Right. So sure. You guys are a good mix because you got a little bit of both, right? So
we try to focus too much. At the end of the day, this stuff for us, the business is, kind of something that grew out of kind of a hole that we saw, and we thought we could help bring some stuff in to help get people better equipped for what they need to get out and explore. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting outside, man. And certainly for us, that's what it all comes back to in the end, is getting out and enjoying yourself, enjoying nature responsibly. Of course, you talked earlier about how there's been a big boom and a lot of people going out. We're really fortunate here to have access to the lands that we do, to be able to adventure and explore and get out there. And the one caveat that I kind of would put out there to anybody who's getting into the segment or has recently gotten into the segment is the whole tread lightly philosophy. If you're taking stuff in, please take it out. Don't tarnish the beauty that we have out there, right? Like, be responsible with it. But we want our kids to enjoy it and our grandkids to enjoy it, right? So
absolutely, we need to be responsible advocates of it, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Once again, we're talking to Jared and Andrew from Roam Wild Overland, and you can reach them at roamwildoverland.com for the store. They're also on YouTube under that name, and also the Instagram under Roam Wild Overland. I don't know why that's so hard for me to say sometimes. But
yeah. It's not the most concise name. Yeah.
It's been a long day. But yeah, definitely want to thank you guys for coming on board. I know it's late there. It's like 10:30 at night now. So
thanks for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Is there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about that I may have forgotten or missed?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I think that at the end of the day, when you reached out to us with the opportunity to kind of speak on here, and Andrew and I kind of talked about it, we just thought it was a great way to kind of, allow people to get to know us a little bit better and kind of, share what we're doing. We encourage people, like, whether, obviously we have the business is what it is. If you have questions kind of about overlanding, about getting outside, you're not sure how to get started, and you just have questions in general, reach out to us. We're not two guys who are going to try to, oh, well, you need this and you need that and whatever, like, whatever the basics are. If you just want to know, some basic places to start, or whether you're an advanced person, you're looking for a solution that we might be able to kind of give you a little bit of insight on, by all means, reach out to us. We're happy to talk to people and happy to try to help the community grow here on the East Coast.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk to you guys about, the East Coast stuff, because that's somebody you got, like I mentioned earlier, you guys are the first East Coast guests we've had on. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are doing the overlanding or the exploring or truck camping or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And, four-wheeling and all that. And I did get a few private messages the other day when I posted up that you guys were coming on, and people are like, yes, finally some Nova Scotia boys.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so it's we do have listeners from coast to coast, and there's some people who are pretty excited to have some East Coast action. So
Awesome. Well, thanks again for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
thank you for coming out. And once again, Jared and Andrew from roamwildoverland.com, Insta, and YouTube.